Hello and welcome to the Emerald City Video Podcast. My name is Russ Burlingame. With me today is Zach Roberts.
Sorry, I thought you were going to introduce me.
We were going to have Dave Nielsen with us today. He slept through the movie.
Yep.
Not that he went to the movie, didn't enjoy it. Just flat out didn't answer his phone.
Yeah.
So, unfortunately, just two of us. But hey, it's the same two who talked about the other half of this episode, which is Big Trouble with Little China.
Yes.
I think we got all the kind of formalities out of the way on that side, so I think I'll probably end up cutting this intro and making that one first.
Mm-hmm.
But the short version is, Peter Quill, the main character of Guardians of the Galaxy, or the kind of point of view character anyway, is very much, and I won't say derivative of Jack Burton, but there's clearly some shared DNA there, which is something that they made explicit in this movie.
Yeah, quite so. And if even not just Jack Burton, but like kind of Kurt Russell's characters of that era, whether it be Snake Plissken and obviously Snake Plissken a lot less than I'd say Jack Burton, just because of the lack of the lack of direct criminality that Snake Plissken implies, and a little bit less care for human beings. Jack Burton clearly has a care for humans, even though the premise of the film is he's just sticking along for his money and then for the girl, but it's not really.
Yeah. Well, I mean, he's kind of he's kind of a douche instead of an actual criminal.
Yes. Yeah.
Which I feel like kind of a douche is one of those things that got said a lot in this movie.
Yeah.
But so I mean, going into Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2, Guardians of the Galaxy is far and away my favorite of the Marvel movies. You and I have talked a lot about in the past how Marvel's formula, they make really enjoyable movies that typically you can watch once or twice, because after that you're just like, oh yeah, it's this one again.
Yeah. So.
The original Guardians has a ton of rewatchability, and it was a really high bar, I think. And you see this reflected, I think, in some of there haven't really been bad reviews, but some of the kind of middling reviews for the new movie all kind of say, they don't really do anything new, and it's more of the same. Which, first of all, I would disagree with.
Yeah.
But secondly, that's indicative mostly of this idea that they're holding it to the standard of the original film.
Yeah.
Which is a difficult thing to do. And I think that this one really stands up in a surprising way.
Oh yeah, I mean it does something that so many of, I would say, the Marvel films don't really do, which is genuinely further the characters beyond just creating new conflicts for them. Because right. I mean, I don't feel like beyond maybe Iron Man 2, I don't feel like Robert Downey Jr.'s character has evolved in any way, shape, and form, other than just in Civil War, I suddenly hate you. And there's kind of outside factors coming in that change it dramatically but that all that seems to happen off camera. There's certainly an evolution here with Gamora and Star-Lord, and that there's a love interest happening that seems to actually be evolving. The Galaxy of Guardians of the Galaxy family, as they continually refer to themselves, is becoming more and more of a family. Rocket's character seems to have really evolved in from being a fun little furry animal that runs around to this film really established him as kind of an individual, which is good, because he's kind of one of those, he's a machination of a scientist, and he can very easily just be a clone or a character or whatever, and just a fun, and you could very easily make a film with half of these characters that is literally just, well, these are really fun characters. It's a raccoon that runs around and holds big guns, and it would be fun as hell. But there's moments where Rocket and blanking on the guy with the not Drax, but the guy with the arrow.
Oh, Yadu.
Yagoo. Yondu. Yes, sorry, Yondu. And Yondu's character have that really, really great scene, and it's a little bit spoilerish, but I'll just generally say a really great scene together, where they talk about how the connection that they have, and I mean, and also Yondu's character, who went from a moderately not evil, but just non-caring. I don't know what he was in the first film to like, I was surprised at how, and again, spoilers, surprised at how much I really wanted him to stick around for a third film. Once it got to the point when it was clear that he wasn't.
Yeah. I will say, I'll probably, for the sake of, because I have one listener who listens to Archie Digest all the time, who wants to listen to this episode, who hasn't seen the movie. So I'll probably end up trimming that a little bit when I go to put this live. But one thing that I can say, I'll touch back down on it in a little while, so that it doesn't seem quite so obvious, so that if I do trim it. But
just do that big, like, spoilers.
Yeah.
But yeah.
I think that well, what the hell? I'll do exactly that. I'll put in the spoiler sound effect so that we could just discuss this while it's fresh in my head.
You can do a spoiler cut and a non-spoiler cut, but yeah.
Yeah. But I think the thing that I really liked in that third act is that you have the big character death.
Yeah.
But it's not the typical superhero event comic or superhero movie character death, where it's done essentially for shock value, and like it made organic sense. And actually, early in the film, they planted the seed of, there was that little throwaway bit of dialogue about essentially how he had always wanted, essentially this particular sort of funeral.
Yeah.
And that because of the life that this person had led, he wasn't going to be able to get it.
Yeah.
And so that was the kind of thing that, like, it was just listed among other things that you're like, oh, okay, whatever. But putting it in there meant that when Yondu actually dies, they were able to give that some really kind of satisfying, denouement.
Yeah.
Because not only did the death mean something in the way that it was done, but also the events that took place in the last 5-6 minutes of the movie, which normally would just be kind of setting up for the sequel, had character-driven, organic meaning.
Yeah. And I really, I mean, speaking of the, like, kind of the setup at the end, I mean, like, I really enjoy too, is that they did it in such a great way that it's not the cut cliffhanger sort of way. And they did it in the, like, we're about to go on this next adventure, but they clearly set up the film in a way that clearly there's going to be a third one. Obviously they started the film, like, they ended the film with Guardians of the Galaxy will be seen again,
we'll return.
We'll return.
Although they're going to be in, it's interesting because this movie, like, just from a behind the scenes kind of perspective, the filmmakers have said this movie takes place 4 months, I think it is, after the first movie. So this didn't unfold in real time. 2-year-old Groot is really 4-month-old Groot, which tells you kind of a little bit about how he ages. And little things like that. But the next movie is going to take place after the events of Avengers Infinity War. And so when we see them again, the Guardians are going to be much farther along the line between 2 and 3 than they were between 1 and 2.
I could see
and
that.
So it certainly will be interesting to see how a lot of that stuff kind of shakes out. Because again, like, all of the changes and evolution that we saw was basically from them being strapped together inside of a rocket for 4 months. Now that it's going to be 4 years or whatever it is, when we see them again, I imagine that's going to be a very, very different kind of dynamic that's going on. I don't think this is the kind of filmmaker who's going to ignore that and not kind of adjust their level of evolution appropriately.
No, I can certainly say. I mean, especially if the rumors you were talking about before are true that Sean Gunn is gonna take over. Not Sean Gunn. Gunn is going to take over kind of as a showrunner of the whole universe.
Yeah, I don't know if that's rumors so much as it was just my interpretation of like what they've been saying about.
I mean, if it does, I mean, if now that you've said it, it's a rumor. Come on, man, that's how the entertainment industry works. You just need one person saying it. Now it's a whisper. Oh, there's whispers about. But
yeah, exactly. Like it's been said on this podcast, so now anybody can quote this podcast and blame me if they're wrong.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. But if that is true, which. The fact that all the big characters, not the big characters, the big directors and big producers of Marvel have kind of, you've seen them fade or move away and they're being replaced with other people. Gunn, clearly, if this film doesn't open with blockbuster numbers, I'll be really surprised.
It's supposed to make like 150 million this weekend.
Yeah, so I mean, like, if you're not going to give it to the single-handedly most kind of unbelievably, like, if Gunn can do this with Guardians of the Galaxy, can you imagine what he can do with the Avengers? Right. I mean, so like, I think they'd be, I mean, not that, Marvel or DC for that matter are, completely brilliant when it comes to the kind of overall show running, atmosphere. But
I think the thing that'll be really interesting if that's the case, and if Gunn does step into a more kind of organizational role, helping them find the direction of the Marvel universe, is finding out how that looks. Because when I spoke to him back during the home video release for Guardians 1, one of the reasons he said he doesn't want to do an Avengers movie, he doesn't want to do a Star Wars movie. Like he wants to make movies where he can shape the universe.
Yeah.
And where like the movie looks and feels like a movie that he wants to make.
Yeah.
And so that was, with Guardians, he had the opportunity to build his own everything, his own aesthetic. And then the reason that Thor looks like Guardians isn't because Gunn was taking copious notes from Marvel on how to do space. It was because Guardians did so well that now looks like.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it'll be interesting to see. They set up a lot. There were 5 post-credit sequences. Some of them were just silly. But some of them set up, I mean, if you are a person who reads the comics, what a couple of those things mean. Certainly it's pretty obvious that the one involving Aisha, which was there were essentially 2 villains in this film. There was Aisha and then there was Ego. Yeah. And Aisha was the kind of mustache twirling villain who we got from the very beginning, and she's bad. And then Ego is the more kind of sweet talking villain who it takes you a while to figure out what his deal is.
Yeah.
Ordinarily, like if I was doing a totally non-spoiler thing, I would be really hard pressed to figure out how to talk about Ego, actually, because like it's like halfway through the movie when you finally accept, okay, yeah, he really is the bad guy.
Yeah.
But the other side of that is he's been referred to as the villain basically since he was cast, and so it's that weird thing of like, are we going to go with the movie going experience, or are we going to go with what literally anybody who cares about the film knows?
Yeah. Sorry, I'm literally, because I was double checking a name on something, and Miley Cyrus did a voice for the film. She was the computer system. Interesting. Anyway, I don't want to distract that, but it was just
That's
like,
okay.
Wait,
I'm
what?
sure Rob Zombie did too, because Rob Zombie is friends with Gunn, and he's a voice in everything.
Yeah, it's just Seth Green did Howard the Duck, so
yeah, he was Howard the Duck last time.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, but
uncredited that time around because in that post-credit sequence, they didn't want to put him in the credits in case people would notice it in the credits and have the post-credit sequence blown.
Yeah. I am curious, but I'm curious not to distract it completely towards cast, just weird cast details. Is how did Vin Diesel do the voice for this one? whether he actually did do, like, I am Groot.
Yeah.
Or whether they did some digital effect on it, because that's something I actually really want to know.
Yeah. I'm sure that's out there. I'm sure that was the first question somebody asked.
Because also, I won't get into the post-credit sequence with Groot, but also that. There's also that, which was also kind of hilarious.
Yeah. It'll be like I said. I was surprised by how much I liked Baby Groot throughout the movie.
Yeah,
because it really like one of the things that I was kind of as I was watching the trailers and stuff, I was like, man, that has the risk of wearing thin real quick.
Yeah.
And they did a surprisingly good job of not doing that. I think honestly.
Go ahead.
Sorry.
Yeah.
I was gonna say part of it, honestly, I think is because the scene that feels like, oh man, that has the risk of wearing thin the most was the thing with the detonator.
Yeah.
And that was the very first thing that we all saw in that first trailer. But it happens with like 10 minutes left in the movie or something.
Yeah.
And so you're just sitting here going, that is a like the part where you're just like, okay, now we've reached peak Baby Groot. We need to dial it back a little bit.
Yeah.
The impression we kind of got was that it was going to be in that first act, like when they were fighting the giant squid monster thing.
Yeah.
And instead, in the final act, when they're having like the climactic battle.
Yeah.
And so it was a totally different kind of experience viewing that scene in context than it was viewing it in the ads.
Yeah, no, I'm genuinely surprised that he didn't turn out to be like the little kid in the film or in the action film or the pup or the dog where you're like, oh my God, is he gonna get squished? There was those moments, but I mean, like dear Lord, I all that went out the window in that opening sequence, which was probably definitely one of the best. I'm trying to figure out how to describe it, but one of the best like action sequences with a comical.
Yeah.
It definitely it wasn't a serious action sequence. You didn't necessarily like. Obviously, it's the first 5 minutes of the film, so you're not like, oh my God, someone's going to die. Like, it's not that sort of franchise.
Yeah, I mean, that scene was the corollary, obviously, to the scene where Star-Lord was first finding the Infinity Gem.
Yeah.
In the first movie, where he's dancing around and he's singing and he's kicking the rat things and all that kind of stuff.
Which, by the way, fantastically have a large role in this film.
They come back like 6 times in this movie.
But anyway, what was the? We actually both looked at each other during one of the scenes when they looked at each other. I don't think we mentioned it yet. When Star-Lord, what he says, you're like, I'm Star-Lord. Who? Like, there's actually another corollary.
Yeah, there was a scene in Big Trouble in Little China where, no, we did talk about that. We talked about how Lopan.
I mean, in the in Guardians, there was a scene where was it Ego who said, "Well, I've heard the antics or heard the stories of whatever."
Yeah,
and there's a cut to where he's like, "Yeah,"
where he's like,
But that's something.
Yeah,
I feel like obviously there's that 4-month gap. I mean, it could have that between the two films, but I really do enjoy on how much evolved the characters have kind of clearly been. The fact that now that they're famous to some level for being the Guardians of the Galaxy, you know, I mean, and the fact that I don't know, the fact that they don't play on it so much that there's no Star Wars celebration scene like at the end of the first trilogy, where like they go in March, but there is like, you know, Rocket has the one-off line, and you're like, oh, if we save the galaxy twice, we'll be able to double our fee, or be able to up our fees, and it keeps so much of the kind of the rebel spirit, kind of the outside. These people aren't Superman, Batman, Aquaman, you know, any of the known trilogy, you know, Wonder Woman, unknown trilogy of like being above everything. They still have, you know, all the jokes and still have everything, and you know.
Yeah, and I will say I think one of the things they did even better this time around than they did the first time was integrating the pop culture elements of it.
Yeah.
You know, because at the end of the day, even though he's like 34 years old or 33 years old, I guess, in continuity, because we saw 34 years later was a title card that popped right after Ego impregnated Meredith.
Yeah.
But even though it's, you know, he's 30 odd years old, this is still a dude who left his home world when he was like 10 or whatever it was. And so basically all of his formative experiences are through like the prism of pop culture.
Yeah.
And so I told my wife almost nothing about the movie because she really loved the first one and wants to go see this. But the thing that I told her, because it amuses me more than anything else, was this is a $180 million superhero blockbuster action movie.
Yeah.
And there's a scene in which someone yells out the line, "I don't know what Cheers is."
Yes, I know. And like I don't. It's one of those films where I go. I'm watching this as a sequel to a massive blockbuster film that I was perplexed as you were that it was so big and that it got made. I think half of our conversation after the film was the fact of like, how did this happen? Like, how are we where we are now? We're having these conversations, you know? I mean, like, obviously, you know, it's fantastic. We're getting films like Black Panther, and we're getting films like, you know, like we're finally getting a Wonder Woman film. We're getting a film that has a starring woman in it. Holy fucking shit. Like, for an action film, that's fucking unheard of. But still, this film perplexes me, not necessarily because, oh yeah, it's a bunch of white guys voicing shit. Well, I'm sorry, Saldana is obviously not white, but you know,
and Vin Diesel's whatever Vin Diesel is.
Vin Diesel is the mixed bag of of fantasticness. I love Vin Diesel, so but this film perpetuates the how in hell does this film continue? I mean, there wasn't just a one-off line about Cheers. It was a running. It was a running line. Like, and the fact that like the demo that they're clearly going after is younger than Cheers.
Yeah, it's like people born after that show was canceled.
You know what? That's what it is. That's what I think is so fantastic about these two films is that they're not kids films per se, but they're all ages films. I mean, like I was, you know, somebody was saying, it's like, oh, you think it'd be okay for my 4-year-old to come in the film? And I'm like, well, if they like, I think Jeff from Comic Book Store was saying this. He was like, you know, well, if they like the first one, I don't think it would be a problem if they were able to live through it.
Yeah. I mean, there's some intensity to the action, but
oh yeah, I mean, it's a really loud film, so it might be too intense on that end. But my big thing is holy crap, like this is like what our age animated stuff was, like Animaniacs and stuff like that. There's a lot of fun. Like if you're 7, you watch Animaniacs, it's awesome, it's hilarious, it's fantastic, it's goofy, it's whatever. You watch it at 14, there's another layer, and then you watch it at like 30, there's a whole nother layer. You know, I mean, and that's what I think is like makes this film clearly able to be the massive blockbuster that, I mean, I hope this thing breaks $1 billion. It would be fucking fantastic if it did, because I think it well deserves it. I will say, I think I don't want to diminish the first one at all because it's fantastic, but I think that this one is better. It took all of it's better, but it also wouldn't be able to be better without the first one, if that makes sense.
Right.
You know?
I think that's the thing. It's very much when you look at superhero movies, I mean, really any movies, when you look at movies, sequels tend to deliver diminishing returns. Unless you get super lucky and you have like The Empire Strikes Back. I think this falls into that Empire Strikes Back mold. And in the same way that like The Empire Strikes Back wouldn't be nearly as effective without Star Wars, because like who gives a shit who his dad is if you don't know like why that's important. All of that, including the dad thing, applies here. Before I go downstairs, which I got to do in like a minute, so we'll wrap up the Guardians half of this episode a little earlier. But one thing I did want to talk about just briefly was the visual effects.
Oh my god!
Because the effects in this movie were fantastic. We saw it in 2D. There were some things that clearly were meant for 3D because you could just see the kind of green screening effect almost. But the thing that struck me the most, because we're discussing this alongside Big Trouble in Little China, was the scene where Yondu and Rocket fly to the rescue of Peter. When they're flying to Ego, and they're without getting into too many spoilery details. There's animation that happens during that flight that's just crazy. It looks like the characters were all put through some like crazy filter on a YouTube video. It
reminds me of Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy when they did the jumps.
Yes,
you know.
Exactly.
And it worked well in that film because of the context of the film, and it works fucking fantastically in this film. I mean, I will say, like, if you're listening to this and you haven't seen it yet, which what the hell, like, you just spoiled yourself. Like, what's going on? But go see it. Like, we were lucky enough, we saw it in a really great theater, this Movie Tavern. They have a massive screen, and it's not like obstructed. It's not got like some guy's head in front of you, like when you're sitting in most like New York City theaters. Go see this in IMAX. I'm gonna go see it in IMAX, or whatever the hell else. I assume it's an IMAX.
I think so.
I'm gonna go see it next time. I got to bring my sister to it. She actually yelled at me that I went without her. But
and we had Dave's ticket.
Yeah, I didn't even think about that. I should have just picked her up. But anyway, 1 o'clock on a school night, which I don't know, she goes to Florida anyway. But go see it at a really great theater if you can, because the sound is amazing. The special effects. I mean, they talked about Ego's World as like one of the biggest things ever. Oh my God! I mean, Ego's World is unbelievable. I mean, the special effects on it. Yeah. It's not like uber real. It's not like oh, this is a real place. But it's a fully realized planet. Which obviously should be, but it's a fully realized thing, and it's like, Sean Gunn, or Sean Gunn, fantastic. Yeah, no. Yeah, I should not discredit Gunn, but the Guns, I'll say the Guns. They went into this. They went into this film blazing, fully loaded. Anyway, but yes. I can't possibly recommend this film enough. It's one of those few things where it's like, we always put caveats on Batman versus Superman, and there's different things. It's like, well, you got to accept this. Literally, I can't think of a human being on this planet that shouldn't go see this film. And if you don't enjoy it, I don't know what kind of person you are. Like, I want to like kind of dissect your humanity if you don't enjoy this film at some level. Like,
I'm gonna make a custom movie poster that has that quote on.
Yes, I should actually tweet it out. James Gunn just liked one of my other tweets about the film, so you'd be like, I don't know what kind of horrible human being you are if you don't like this film. It might be a little too long for a quote, though.
I'm in full agreement. Like I said, I love pairing these two movies together because it works really well on a bunch of levels, because the casting thing and the tonal thing, and then like when I was watching that scene where the crazy jump thing, where they were mutilating the characters' faces essentially with the computers. Mm-hmm. I was just like, man, this feels like the way that a Big Trouble in Little China remake could work with computers.
Can we get James Gunn, if you're out there, if you're listening, that'd be awesome if you're listening, by the way. But if you're listening, can you somehow just be like, no, I need to do that film. I need to do film. I don't care who you cast then. If James Gunn does Big Trouble in Little China, it can be The Rock. I don't care. He'll figure it out.
Yeah.
And to me, that's the kind of the magic, like any other director that you kind of throw this out to, you describe this film. I mean, especially with the first one, but even more so with kind of doubling down with the sequel. Because I was very, very worried about how this film was going to be. And I apologize to Gunn. I should not have been. I dare doubt your majesty, because this film, I have a hard time describing on how much fun I had watching this film, and how much I needed it too.
It's like the perfect movie for this horrible moment in time.
Yes, yes, it is.
All right, everybody. Thank you for listening to the Emerald City Video Podcast. I'm going to go take care of children who are not little trees.
Now it sounds like you're threatening them.
Well,
I'm going to go take care of some children.
All right. Good night.
Good night.